Coming up, back in the 90s, I worked for a while in New York with GT Interactive, and the New Yorker magazine was known even then for its in-depth reporting and quality writing. Even in today's days of TLDR, the New Yorker doesn't shy away from long-form pieces, and this week saw an epic 10,000-word article by their staff writer Sam Knight entitled "What Have 14 Years of Conservative Rule Done to Britain?" With the byline, "Living standards have fallen. The country is exhausted by constant drama, but the UK can't move on from the Tories without facing up to the damage that has occurred." And Brexit features as a major theme of this article. Stay tuned. So this epic New Yorker article starts off by informing our American cousins a bit of background about previous Tory and Labour administrations, and then informing them that since 2010 we've had a succession of Conservative governments, which the article summarises as a quickening, lowering churn, 5 prime ministers, 3 general elections, 2 financial emergencies, a once-in-a-century constitutional crisis, and an atmosphere of tired, almost constant drama. Sam Knight, the article's author, has been interviewing prominent Conservative politicians since last year to get the material for this article, and it's absolutely damning of both the Tories and of Brexit. How about this for a description? The only way to think about it is as a psychodrama, enacted for the most part by a small group of middle-aged men who went to elite private schools, studied at the University of Oxford, and have been climbing and chucking one another off the ladder of British public life ever since. The UK has yet to recover from the financial crisis that began in 2008, and according to the Resolution Foundation, from then till now has been the worst period for wage growth since the Napoleonic Wars. Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England, told Sam Knight it's just not that productive an economy anymore. So how do the Tories get away with it? It's all about constantly drawing dividing lines, a former Tory party strategist told him. The 2 momentous decisions of this period of Tory government have been austerity and Brexit, both setting people against each other, distracting the electorate while the state has withered under the charlatans who have taken over. Austerity was a political choice, not a necessity. The global financial crisis of 2008 was successfully and dishonestly linked by the Tories to Labour's public spending. Alexei Sayle put it best when he said, "Austerity is the idea that the global financial crash of 2008 was caused by there being too many libraries in Wolverhampton." And just to make this point absolutely clear, Knight interviewed ex-Tory austerity Chancellor George Osborne, who admitted to him the quite shocking fact that the word austerity was deliberately introduced into the lexicon by myself and David Cameron. You see, austerity evoked the country's measured and steady rebuilding after the Second World War. Ex-Chancellor Osborne then added, "The word didn't have the connotations then that it does now." The political choice of austerity meant that between 2010 and 2019, British public spending fell by 9%. The victims were the court system and prisons, the police, the environment, public transport, social care, youth programmes, road maintenance, public health, the diplomatic corps, and so on. And then the article references a 2019 paper by Tiemo Fetzer, an economist at the University of Warwick, which asked, "Did austerity cause Brexit?" Fetzer found that beginning in 2010, the parts of the country most affected by welfare cuts were also the more likely to support Nigel Farage's UKIP. So there's your direct link between austerity and Brexit. In 2016, 2 weeks after the referendum, Danny Dorling, a professor at Oxford University, published research suggesting that a lot of Brexit supporters were older and economically secure, but had a keen sense of the country going downhill. Something was falling apart, Dorling said. They had got a house in their 20s, their children were in their 40s, and they might be renting. Rather than blaming the Tory government's austerity programme, it seems that this demographic decided that being a member of the EU was what was causing all of Britain's problems. So by deciding to settle an internal Tory party argument about Britain's place in Europe, Prime Minister David Cameron turned the weird obsession with the EU by a small group of Tory right-wingers into a terrifyingly binary choice for the whole UK population, basically on how they felt their life was going. But back to Cameron's Chancellor, George Osborne. His take on Brexit in 2024? He told Knight, "There is a sort of problem for the British state, which is that they are having to live a lie. It's a bit like tractor production figures in the Soviet Union. You have to sort of pretend that this thing is working, and everyone in the system knows it isn't." Isn't it a shame that our current crop of politicians just don't feel they can be this candid? Almost 8 years after the vote, what stays with Sam Knight is how, overnight and against the will of its leaders, the country abandoned its economic model as the Anglo-Saxon gateway to the world's largest trading bloc and replaced it with nothing at all. After the vote, Cameron resigned and was replaced by Theresa May, who worked with a small group of advisers to formulate a Brexit strategy that satisfied nobody. The abiding image of the Brexit talks was a photo of Michel Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator, with his colleagues and their neat piles of paper all on one side of a table, while their British counterparts, led by thick-as-mince David Davis, a bluff former Special Forces reservist, sat on the other side with a single notebook between them. May eventually resigned as Prime Minister and was replaced by Boris Johnson, who unlawfully suspended Parliament in order to push through his hard Brexit deal without proper debate in Parliament, whose sovereignty Brexit was meant to be all about.
This court has already concluded that the Prime Minister's advice to Her Majesty was unlawful, void and of no effect. The prorogation was also void and of no effect. This is the unanimous judgment of all 11 justices.
Such irony, or hypocrisy, or criminality, take your pick. The effect upon the fundamentals of our democracy was extreme, the Supreme Court justices found. But Johnson prevailed. Before the year was out, he'd cobbled together a new hardline Brexit deal and thumped Jeremy Corbyn at the 2019 general election on the three-word slogan, "Get Brexit done." Then came COVID. For months, the country staggered from one set of restrictions to the next, reflecting Johnson's inconstant attitude towards the virus and his incompetence. And then followed the news that Johnson and his staff had organised parties while the rest of the country was under lockdown. Johnson resigned 6 months later. Within days of taking over, new Prime Minister Liz Truss launched her growth plan, a £45 billion package of tax cuts intended to reignite the British economy. Instead, it crashed the bond markets. The pound fell to a record low against the dollar. Her approval rating dropped by almost 30 points in a week. Truss was toast, or more accurately, lettuce. The New Yorker article opines that Truss was neither an outlier nor a secret radical, but a representative spirit of the Conservative Party and its years in power. After that, the article moves on to Sunak. When will it end? The New Yorker asks. The Prime Minister began preparing the ground after his first year in office by presenting himself as a change candidate. A ridiculous idea, considering the circumstances. Sam Knight went to Manchester to watch Sunak address the Conservative Party's annual conference last year, and here's his take. He was introduced on stage by his wife, Ekshata Murty. Sunak and Murty have an estimated net worth of about £500 million, he quotes. She addressed Britain's most successful political organisation as if it were a local gardening society. Having positioned himself as the country's next truly transformative leader, the article suggests that Sunak then offered his party a weirdly pallid programme, the dismantling of HS2, to abolish smoking and to reform the A-levels. The article then moves on to an analysis of the polling, which suggests a huge defeat for the Tories at the next election, and then gives some consideration to the future of British politics, noting that under Starmer, Labour has been tactical in the extreme, exorcising Corbyn's left-wing policies while making vague noises about everything else. It has nothing new to say about Brexit and equivocates about its own tax and spending plans if it wins power. Hard to argue with that synopsis, to be fair. And the piece indeed quotes a very smug George Osborne, commenting on this with satisfaction. The underlying economic arguments of austerity have basically been accepted. The New Yorker article agrees, saying it's unnerving to be heading into an election year in Britain with the political conversations so small when the questions feel immeasurable. The in-depth piece ends with a report of a chat between hard-right Tory MP and Suella Braverman's sidekick, John Hayes, who I believe sums up the view from the right wing of the Tory party when he told the New Yorker journalist, "I think the key thing for the Conservatives now is to be more conservative." Surprisingly, arch-Brexit campaigner Hayes seems to relish the coming election. It's as if, after almost 14 years of tortuous experiment, real conservatism might finally be at hand as he looks forward to a post-election diminished Conservative Party led by someone like Suella Braverman or Priti Patel, Kemi Badenoch or even Nigel Farage. Perhaps a merger with the Reform Party UK Limited is at this point conceivable. And on that very scary thought, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do remember to give it a like, share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to read the entire 10,000 word New Yorker article, I'll paste the link below this video.